World War I began on July 28, 1914, when a Serbian man shot and killed Archduke Ferdinand, the next heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. With his death, the already tense relationship between Serbia and Austria-Hungary crumbled, and war between the two countries began. Because of treaties, Germany was obligated to protect Austria-Hungary, and Russia and France were obligated to protect Serbia. Russian troops were positioned along Russia's border with Austria-Hungary and Germany, and French troops prepared to fight Germany on its western border. Germany's strategy for battling enemies from both the east and west at the same time was known as the Schlieffen Plan, and it included attacking northwestern France by first invading Belgium. As soon as Germany invaded Belgium on August 4, 1914, England, which was obligated to protect Belgium under a treaty, joined the war. Within weeks, British, French, and Belgian soldiers would be digging a line of trenches across Belgium and France, with Germany moving alongside, digging its own line. This was the start of trench warfare. Though the war had only been on for a few months, by December of 1914, 1 million lives had already been lost. The Great War had spread all over Europe, and two lines of trenches, anywhere from 10 yards to a mile apart, ran for more than 400 miles across Belgium and France. Life in the trenches was terrible. The men were exposed to the weather, which included rain that would leave them standing waist high in water with no place to go, and snow and cold that would leave them freezing. One soldier wrote, "It was freezing hard all day. In some places we were up to our knees in clay, and a foot up our overcoats. It had frozen hard, and our trousers and coats looked like boards." By now, hope that the war would be over quickly had faded, but the hope of a temporary ceasefire for the holiday was still alive on both sides. Among the people who campaigned for peace was Pope Benedict XV. The Pope was opposed to the war from the beginning, and as it carried on, one of his most passionate causes was better treatment for prisoners of war, especially injured ones. On November 1, 1914, Pope Benedict issued an appeal for peace. In his appeal, he wrote, "For what could prevent the soul of the common Father of all being most deeply distressed by the spectacle presented by Europe? Nay, by the whole world, perhaps the saddest and most mournful of which there is any record. Although no official truce was declared, on Christmas, the first year of the Great War, Pope Benedict's dream of peace would come true, if only for a very short time, when thousands of Allied and German soldiers left the trenches, put down their weapons, and celebrated the holiday together in what would become known as the Christmas Truce of 1914. Letters and interviews of the British soldiers who were there explain how the Christmas truce began. As the Maryport private's letter explains, on Christmas Eve at 4 p.m. we had orders that unless the enemy advanced, we were not to fire, and the same applied to Christmas Day. Whether the Germans had the same order or not, I don't know, but no shot was fired on either side. Lance Corporal Henderson of the Royal Engineers wrote, "About 3:30 p.m. we discovered a board stuck up in the German trench. We had our glasses on in a minute, and read the words in big block letters, 'Concert over here tonight, all British troops welcome.' When Christmas morning came, the men appreciated being able to work without the fear of being shot, so that they could complete practical tasks like burying the dead and fixing barbed wire in the daylight rather than in darkness. This practical use of a temporary truce was similar to when northern and southern troops would call for an informal ceasefire to bury dead and exchange supplies during the American Civil War." On the subject of burying the dead, one soldier wrote from the Western Front, "The dead on both sides had been lying out in the open since the fierce night fighting of a week earlier. When I got out, I found a large crowd of officers and men, English and German, grouped around the bodies, which had already been gathered together and laid out in rows. It was a ghastly sight. The digging completed, the graves were filled in, and the German officers remained to pay their tribute of respect while our chaplain read a short service." On December 27th, a Royal Field Artillery officer wrote, "You can hardly imagine it. The only sentries were two unarmed ones to keep our men from straying out beyond the barbed wire. All our fellows were digging in the open, and theirs were doing the same. The only forbidden was to make any improvement to the barbed wire. Further, they agreed that if by any mischance a single shot were fired, it was not taken to be an act of war, and an apology would be accepted, also that firing would not be opened without due warning on both sides." However, in addition to the work, they also recount more enjoyable activities like taking photos, trading souvenirs and supplies, and playing football. Unfortunately, they understood no French or English, wrote a Royal Field Artillery officer, and we could not muster a word of German between us. You will rather gather that conversation languished. Finally, they got a man out of the trenches who had lived for some years in America, and he acted as an interpreter. Lance Corporal Henderson of the Royal Engineers wrote on December 26th, "This turned out to be another day of peace. About 10 a.m., some more German troops came forward, 2 or 3 lots, and I honestly think they wanted to surrender. They came up within hearing distance and kept shouting, 'Me come with you,' but our officers sent them all back." The friendship shared that Christmas of 1914 was always overshadowed by the knowledge that the truce could not last and they would soon be shooting at their new friends. But even knowing that, there was still hope of future compromise. As British Captain Alfred Chater's Christmas Day letter to his mother reads, "I don't know how long it will go on for. I believe it was supposed to stop yesterday, but we can hear no firing along the front today except a little distant shelling. We are, at any rate, having another truce on New Year's Day as the Germans want to see how the photos come out." Despite what they hoped for, orders would likely come from superiors to stop fraternizing, as leaders on both sides feared that allowing the two to engage in any type of friendly contact would soften the troops to make them less effective in battle. Worse than that, this contact would amount to treason. "War is no sport," said an article in a German newspaper, and we are sorry to say that those who made these overtures or took part in them did not clearly understand the gravity of the situation. In a letter, a Belgian soldier wrote, "Was it not splendid? Think you that we were wrong? We have been criticized here. It is said that we ought to have fired, but would it not have been dastardly? And then, why kill one another on such a festive day?" On December 26th, Lance Corporal Henderson wrote, "The alarm went about midnight, and we stood up till daybreak, when we found that our pals of the previous 2 days had tried to rush our position. But they got cut up as usual, and I believe the next morning the ground where we had been so chummy, and where Germans had wished us a Merry Christmas, was now covered with their dead." World War I would continue for 4 years, and by the time it came to an end on November 11, 1918, over 16 million people, both soldiers and civilians, had been killed. The 100th anniversary of the Christmas truce was celebrated across Europe in late 2014, and in Belgium, a group of men volunteered to reenact the famous event. At the same time, a British supermarket made a commercial reenacting the Christmas truce. The commercial ends with a British soldier giving a candy bar he had just gotten from home to his new German friend. The store donated the money made from selling the candy bars to the Royal British Legion, a charity for veterans, but some still felt that the supermarket was exploiting the stories and suffering endured by the soldiers who were there. Although it involved only a few people, another Christmas truce happened, this time between American and German soldiers, in Belgium in World War II. On Christmas Eve, in the Ardennes forest, 3 American soldiers and 4 German soldiers all stumbled upon a little cabin of a woman and her son. The woman allowed all the men in her home and fed them as long as they agreed to leave their weapons outside and not fight with each other. The men agreed, and though they were enemies, enjoyed a meal and the fire. In the morning, the soldiers took their weapons, said their goodbyes, and headed back to war. In 9th century BC Greece, the Olympic truce was established. Under the truce, during the Olympic Games, athletes were allowed to travel safely to and from the Games. We saw the spirit of the truce alive in the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. Although they are at war, North Korea and South Korea agreed to march under one flag. Like the Christmas truce of 1914, the Olympic truce between these countries will not bring peace, but there is still meaning in making the compromise to put aside conflict temporarily to achieve a common goal. The Christmas truce of 1914 is more than a heartwarming story about cold, homesick soldiers briefly finding friendship with their enemies. It's also a reminder that, even if they may do nothing to change the outcome of a conflict, temporary truces can bring order to the chaos of war and comfort to those called upon to participate in it.